Welcome back to the Pursuit of Progress podcast. As always, this is Adam Lang here with my co host, Ben. And I'm really excited, guys. Today, we're going to be talking about overcoming perfectionism, why perfect prevents progress. So, on the show, we always are working really hard just to help empower you guys to grow, improve, and just achieve more every single day. And I think this is really important to talk a little bit about as far as the misconception of what perfectionism is and whether or not it's ever really achievable and really important to be focused on. If you guys have ever caught yourself maybe stuck on a project because it wasn't perfect yet, well, we're going to talk today just about how we can explore what might be holding you back and why embracing good enough can really dramatically boost your progress. Ben, how are you doing, man? Excited to have you with us again today.
Oh, so excited to be here. This is going to be a really fun conversation today. So I'm so excited that we're having this conversation.
Absolutely. So Ben, let's just kind of dive into it. Just share with me a little bit about like what your definition of perfectionism is and just what your take is on this topic.
Yeah, it's something that I've struggled with at times throughout my life. I would say I really struggled with it pretty significantly growing up, especially junior high and high school. I would just put a tremendous amount of pressure on myself, not to be perfect with everything, but really to be perfect with the things that I cared about. Athletics, basketball, running. So perfectionism to me is the desire to be flawless, without error, not making mistakes. But ironically, it often leads to procrastination, anxiety, and complete avoidance of those important tasks. Winston Churchill famously said that perfection is the enemy of progress. And since we're having this conversation, some of the, just a couple of examples that I had younger when it came to perfectionism is I would have these goals every year for basketball that I would write out for myself, things that I wanted to do and accomplish, and points per game, assists, rebounds, and I was so focused on my statistics that I wasn't playing the game the way that it was intended to be played. So I was overly concerned about, am I hitting the goal that I had for my points or my assists? And because of that, I put so much pressure on myself. If I didn't, I wanted to score 17 points a game when I was in eighth grade. And if I didn't hit that, if I only scored 15, I felt like this tremendous failure, even though I may have been doing all of these other things that were good and help facilitating others and getting other team members involved. And maybe we still got the win. But, because of this desire to be perfect, created so much effing anxiety for me. I mean, I remember like before basketball games, I would be so nervous and just it turned into a very negative experience for me.
I'm so thankful that we grew up, we're the same age. We grew up when we did before social media and just all of this digital presence because back then it was very, minimal in a way where it was just some of these like measurables, like how many points did you score, like kind of basic stuff. Today, it's
Yeah.
not just about sports. It's also just about, like this perception of perfection with, looks, success with, Instagram and this fake false sense of reality. And I think it's just it's a plague or it's a disease, I think, for so many people. And I've gone down that road myself, just seeing other people the same age as me that are further along, at least from the outside looking in on, where they're at in their career or their finances or relationships, whatever it may be. But just I think it's just more challenging now than ever for people. And I don't see how that changing at all in the future either. I think it's going to just get more and more tough. And this is just a topic I think that is so important now for people to, kind of get a little bit more of a realistic bearing on, why perfection doesn't ever really exist and how it's not something that you need to be worrying about.
I was sharing this with you before we went live that one thing that I always tell my kids is the goal is to not be perfect. That's not a goal. We're not trying to be perfect. The goal is to learn how to become more disciplined. The goal is to grow. The goal is to become more responsible. The goal is to learn from our mistakes. But when we try and be perfect, what we're really teaching ourselves is to not take risks. And if you're not going to take risks, you are never going to be able to step in who you are called to be because you are going to have to learn to take risks. One big thing for me when I transitioned out of my salary job into my loan officer job, which is 100% commission, I mean, I was so afraid. You know why? Because I was afraid to fail.
Hmm.
I wanted to excel at this job immediately, and that initial launch, making that transition is very, very difficult. That first year was challenging, despite more favorable market conditions than what we have now. But because I was willing to take that risk and ultimately persevere, it's absolutely changed my life.
And I also kind of want to push back on maybe other people are thinking this too, that we're not trying to make an excuse to give more of a half-assed effort. You still want to be
Yeah.
giving 100%. It's just a matter of understanding that even at 100%, it's never going to be perfect. Even the most famous athletes in the world, we were also talking about this earlier, like Michael Jordan as an example, he still failed more often than succeeded, or, just there's
Yeah.
this whole different mindset of what perfection actually is. And you see the highlight reel of influencers or athletes or whoever it is that maybe you find inspiration from, and just understanding that there's more to the story than maybe what meets the eye on the 30-second Instagram reel that you're watching, this, showing off all of their accomplishments.
I'm going through some of these same mental exercises with my daughter now that she's in her freshman track season, and she'll sometimes, she has high expectations and high standards for herself, so sometimes she will put a little bit of pressure on herself. But I just have to remind her, I'll ask her these 5 or 6 questions. Did you do everything possible to prepare for today as best you could? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, to your point, we're not talking about half-assing. We're
Hmm.
not talking about showing up late or not putting the work in. And so I'll ask, like, did you put the miles in the off season? Yes. Have you been doing your track workouts during the season? Yes. Have you been getting an appropriate amount of sleep? How has your nutrition been? Do you have a plan or a strategy for the race that you're trying to execute? Yes, I do. And so you've put the work in, you've run the miles, you're doing the track workout, you're well rested, you've been monitoring your nutrition, your blood work, and you have a plan. At
Love
that
that.
point, that's all you can do. Now go execute it, and then let the cards fall where they will.
Love that. Yeah, I think with something like track and field, cross country, something that's like very standardized, predictable, that's got to be tough. Where, one week she runs a 5 minute, 30 minute, 5 point, 5.5 minute mile. And
Yeah.
then being able to like understand, why she didn't improve every single time. And, this, when you have like a very specific number or number of goals or scoreboard, that kind of stuff, I think just adds a different dimension of perfection, because it's not always quantitative like it is in sports.
I was a little discouraged after this last week because, she's really focusing on the 2 mile, which is 8 laps around the track. And so this last week, she wanted to take about 15 seconds off her time, and she ended up taking 2 seconds off. So she went faster, but only 2 seconds faster. And then she also wanted to break 12 minutes, and her time was 12 minutes flat, point one. And so that was kind of frustrating because she was literally a tenth over her goal. But we just had to remind her that, I mean, you're getting, your trajectory, you're moving in the right direction. And there are probably some things you could have done a little bit different in this race as far as strategy and pacing. But you're a freshman. This is like the third time you've ever done this race in your entire career. Like, big deal. You're going to learn from it.
Hmm. And I'll just share a little personal story when it comes to, social media, just getting out there into the digital world as far as YouTube,
Yeah.
Instagram, all that kind of stuff. I think one of the biggest hesitations and roadblocks that I have just witnessed over and over with a lot of my peers that are also trying to just get out there more and have more of a digital presence with, again, like video as an example, just they never actually hit that publish button on YouTube because it's not perfect. Oh, well, I don't want, somebody to see this because it's not perfect. And it's crazy how much more influence, how much more engagement you actually get from your audience when it's not perfect. When it's not perfect, that's when you're more authentic, you're more relatable. Other people that are consuming your content can actually kind of understand and relate to you more than just some polished, again, highlight reel type content. And just, I
Yeah.
think that's where you actually have the most influence, is when you are visibly showing some of the failures, or at least showing that you're also not perfect, and that's just how you relate to people.
Do you
Authenticity.
remember uploading those first couple of videos? And I mean, do you
Yeah.
remember like being very self-conscious and like, kind of to your point, I just remember like, oh my, it was such a internal battle, like exposing myself, putting myself out there. And, I'm going on camera, I'm spouting off about this thing that maybe people don't care. Maybe they don't care about me. I'm having all these negative, but what's been so encouraging through this exercise of just making content the last couple of years is that I feel so much more confident now just because I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I just do not care. It's like I'm gonna make a video that I think I would find value in, and I'm just gonna share it. And I don't care what people think.
Mm-hmm. 1000% agree. Well, let's just talk through a couple like actionable steps for people that maybe are having a hard time with this, that just can't overcome that kind of uncertainty or resistance because it's not perfect. I think one for me, just right off the bat, is just setting realistic standards and just understanding that good enough is acceptable. Just realizing that, as long as you're giving it your effort and you can kind of lay in bed that night and be content and at least proud of what effort you put into this. If as long as you're doing
Yeah.
that, that is perfection in a sense. I mean, that you've perfectly followed the game plan or the execution plan of whatever it is you're doing. That maybe it's not perfect in one sense, but in a way it could be perfect just with how well you've put the effort in to do whatever it is you're trying to get done.
Yeah, your pursuit of your passion, your pursuit of your purpose. How
Your
how are you going
pursuit
about
of
that?
progress.
Your pursuit of progress podcast. That's what should really be focused on is, not, we get so hung up on the actual result most of the time because that's what we're trained to. But the reality is we should be more focused on the process, our pipeline of habits, and what our activities look like, because that is going to create the result. One of my favorite sports books is by Bill Walsh, legendary San Francisco 49ers head coach. And in that, he talks about champion. This is one of his famous quotes, that champions only become champions once they have behaved like champions for long enough. So when you take someone who's not a champion, but they learn what championship behavior is, which is exactly what you're describing, and they do that for long enough, then the championship will manifest.
Love that. And I'd also
You
say,
should,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ben.
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say also like identifying when that perfectionism kind of hits, when it's the most likely to really come off
Yeah.
perfectly or at least as high quality as possible, and just kind of being able to recognize that, and whatever pattern or trigger you had to accomplish that, recreate that. So like with me, with being on video with like my YouTube channel, kind of understanding that like certain times of the day, even certain days of the week, when I'm more likely to maybe be in a more outgoing mood. Maybe it's just a little bit more self confidence. Maybe right after I get back from the gym and take a shower and I'm already kind of a little bit more animated. Just kind of being able to audit your lifestyle or your personality and just set yourself up for success and for perfectionism. I'm putting that in quotes if you guys are listening on this podcast, but just being able to just identify these areas where at least you're able to have a higher chance of being at least closer to perfectionism. You're never going to get there, but at least you're setting yourself up as much as possible.
Yeah, you're and develop and identifying what those triggers are. Maybe the opposite. Maybe this time of day isn't a good time. Like for me, I found that I enjoy, like you, mornings a lot more. In the evenings, I'm more fatigued. I'm tired. A lot of times, I don't have that same spark. I don't have that same energy. Another important note for me on this would be to really implement strict deadlines to prevent endless revisions. And an example of that, just with like some social media, I'll go through with my editor and I'm going to watch the video one time and we're doing one set of revisions. We're not going to go back and like take one, take two, go through and do countless revisions. I'm going to, if I see something misspelled or I see an editing error, I'm going to call it out that one time, and then after that, after he makes it, it's going live.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, having a deadline is really, really important. It just keeps that monotonous just never ending. Yeah, it's good, but it's not great mentality. Just it's good enough.
Mhm.
I'll kind of share one that kind of goes piggybacks off that one, and that's just the 80-20 rule. Just understanding that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. So just really identifying what that 20% is, and that's where you're going to have a higher chance of perfection, or at least maybe a better word than perfection is just excellence. Just having a higher level of excellence by
Yeah.
figuring out what that 20% is. And really, that other 80%, trying to avoid at all costs, focusing any of your time and energy on that stuff. Just really, that's the Pareto principle. If you guys want to learn a little bit more about that, digging into the Pareto principle and that 80-20 rule.
Yeah, I like the idea of being excellent, but not being perfect. I think trying to be perfect, that shouldn't be the goal. And so, reframing that, rephrasing that, which we've talked about in other podcasts, let's focus on excellence.
Mhm.
And excellence to me is just consistent, sustained, day in, day out effort with a really big vision and a plan to back it up.
And then
You
last but
know,
not least, Ben, just talking about, maybe you can share a little bit on this one too, just regularly reflecting and just celebrating whatever the accomplishments are that you are getting, not having the lack of getting to perfectionism be kind of a negative or a knock on your self-confidence, but just appreciating and kind of seeing whatever progress you've made and celebrating that. I think that's really important. Something that
yeah,
I don't do enough for sure.
and on that same point, I think a lot of us make the mistake where we define progress as by results. And so, for example, someone that's new to YouTube, they might look at progress as getting their first 1,000 subscribers instead of uploading their first 10 videos.
Hmm. Yeah.
So in my mind, it's more based off of the habits and the behaviors than the results sometimes. But regardless, though, they should be celebrated. Another mentor of mine, Dan Martell, I've done some coaching with him, and that's one of his big things is really celebrating the journey. And so when you have the big vision, you have the goals, you've developed a plan on how you're going to execute it. Then when you've hit those milestones, and again, it's not necessarily about results, it could just be about the consistent activity. I've gone to the gym 100 straight days. I've done this, I've gone out for 100 runs. I asked my daughter, how she wanted to celebrate her running because she's done such a tremendous job of staying consistent. And so she was like, well, you know what? I'd love to go back to Europe this summer. And I was like, really? I was like, she was like, yeah, if I hit these running goals that I have, I'd love to go back to Europe. And I was like, you know what? If you hit those goals, we are going back to Europe.
That's
And we're
cool.
going to celebrate her. So now if she hits her goals, now when we go back to Europe, it's not just going to be a trip that we're going to remember for the rest of our life. It's going to be a way that we are able to celebrate her for her accomplishments for the rest of her life. So 20 years from now, we will be saying, do you remember that time that we went to Europe because you did this thing or you stayed this consistent? It gives the trip so much more meaning.
And
And so
hopefully that
when you tie it to really celebrating the journey, it gives whatever the reward is so much more meaning.
and hopefully those goals are realistic and not a level of perfection where, it's a realistic goal. I think that's important too,
Yeah.
just having it be
Hmm.
something that's obtainable, just from a teaching lesson standpoint too with her.
Yeah, challenging, but something that you're going to have to go after. It's not, you're not going to be able to just show up on a Saturday and go hit the goal. You're going to
Hmm.
have to really be serious. It's going to require dedication, discipline, commitment.
Love it. Well, hopefully we can have her on the podcast one of these days, and she can share how she hopefully met some of those goals and is planning the Europe trip this summer.
Oh yeah, Europe trip's already planned. Now now we just got to finish the work.
Hell yeah. Well, let's just wrap this one up, guys. First and foremost, I think this is one that can always be kind of circled back on. This is something that's not going to be achieved in a day or a week ever. That's why we're not going for perfectionism. We're going for excellence. So just maybe share with us a little bit on social media. Leave a comment in the notes on the YouTube channel episode. Just share with us a little bit more about what you might be doing and what your idea of perfectionism is. and how you're hopefully at least getting as close to it as you can. Ben, you want to close this one out for us?
Yeah. Go ahead and just to reiterate some of the things that you said, just commit to one thing that you've been avoiding. Just commit to one thing that you've been avoiding, and that's one thing that I talk a lot about in our house is you don't want to do it, good. Go do it. Because you're not going to let that fear or that procrastination win. I don't want to go run 3 miles. Well, good. Now I'm going to go run 3 miles because I don't want to go run 3 miles. So now I'm going to go do it because that is not going to win.
Yeah, that would be a
Take that
great.
attitude.
That'd be a
What?
great like slogan, like maybe like just do it. Oh, that's
What do you
Nike.
mean?
Oh no, you said go do it, go do it. I'm like just do it.
Go do it. Go do it. Do it now. I have a plaque in my bathroom that says "Do it now," so maybe that could be it. But just keep pushing forward. Keep believing. Have that big vision. Dream big. Believe big. Have a positive and productive week, and we'll see you guys next week on the Pursuit of Progress podcast. Benjamin Adams for Adam Lang signing off. We'll see you guys next week.
See you guys.